Hi everyone, and welcome to another Future Design Forum 10-minute fireside Q&A session hosted by myself, Andy Smith of TDA Creative, the UX product and tech talent agency. I am delighted to be joined today by Jeremy Belcher, who is currently the VP of Product at Auxilius in New York City and was previously the Director of Product Design at Auxilius in New York City. Thanks for joining, Jeremy.
Thanks, Andy. Nice to be here.
Great to have you here. Great to have you here. And this is an interesting chat because, as we know, it's a design leader chat generally, and you're not currently a design leader. You are kind of heading up product.
Former design leader, but yes.
Design leading and heading up product, right? So I think that kind of transition and how you get to that is really interesting to design leaders and design and product people in general. So if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little brief lowdown in your career today and what got you to the current position.
Sure. Yeah. So currently I'm the VP of product at Auxilius. We're a financial management tool for companies who are running clinical trials. But I actually started there as the director of product design, kind of the early designer in the startup, kind of designed that application almost from the beginning. And, over the course of about a year and a half to 2 years or so, I ended up taking over the role of product. I think we had a product person at the time, didn't kind of work out. And so having just been under the hood for so long, doing the design work, really getting to know the customers and the users and the use cases and the business cases for all these things, they gave me the job of running the product team or in the product organization at the company, which has been a really fun transition. Definitely a real different set of challenges, but a lot of overlap with some design. But prior to Auxilius, I'd been a designer for over 10 years, working at a number of different companies, both product and agency side. I've worked on clients like Google, Saturday Night Live, BMW. I mean, a huge variety over many years.
Right.
But it's been quite a journey to get here, but it's an interesting spot to be for sure.
And I'm saying transition. I know you've still got design leadership there as well, but the move into product, which is a big part of your time now and what you do, was that something you'd actually been looking to do, or did it more happen?
Yeah, I think it was. As a designer, I'd always been interested in kind of the business side of what we do. Not just obviously creating the experiences and thinking about the users and the use case, but thinking about like the business and the business case for things. And so I'd always been interested. I've worked on startups of my own before. I've used to work at a management consultancy doing like new venture incubation. And so the business angle of it was always interesting to me. And as I showed up at this smaller company and got to work very closely with the product team and the founders because it was a tiny startup, I got to actually see what that entailed and what it looked like and how you actually did it.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting to me. And I had a voice in it early and I got kind of into it. You get the idea that, as a designer, you often have like a very strong point of view on like how you should do things and what you should be focusing on. But you don't always necessarily have the say, whereas on the product side, you often do. And so that part was compelling to me. And that's been really interesting. I mean, obviously it comes with like the trade-off of now you're responsible for it and it's on you. You're with the designer. Okay. Sometimes I think you have like one level of remove there. So that's definitely one of the big differences, but it's been really great. I've enjoyed it.
Good. And how do you think your previous experience, your design leadership, how do you think that's kind of benefited and helped you working in a more product focused role?
Yeah, I think a few things. Like, a lot of the skills you learn as a designer, especially as your career moves on, translate like really well. Not just I would say as your career advances generally, almost whatever you do, you can use a lot of these things, but some of the basics, like, for example, talking to customers and users, that's something that as a designer and who does design research, I've been doing forever, right? And most designers will do that in their experience. And so that's really no different, right? Like you might ask different kinds of questions, but at the end of the day, like reaching out to customers, reaching out to users, getting on the phone, preparing an interview guide, like all those skills, like taking the answers from the interviews, distilling it into insights, right? That's something that I've done a million times before. Many designers have. Like that experience stays the same, right? You talk to customers and, again, you might change some of the questions a little bit, but for the most part, it's the same process. So there's that, so that's something that you can kind of take with you, and that's been really helpful.
Yeah.
A lot of product management is around kind of wrangling stakeholders, and again, designers do that too, right? They need feedback and input from all these people. So being able to kind of navigate who you need to navigate, get the feedback that you need, right? That's no different. really in the product role, right? It might be some different stakeholders, but for the most part, it's the same basic skill set. Then I think like the other one too around as a designer, you present your work, right? And that
Yep.
comes with enough experience. You've got some skills around sort of storytelling and pitching and presentation. And that's a
Yeah.
really powerful skill. Again, that's for anyone, but it really applies in product when you have to present your plan, present your strategy, say like, this is what I think we should work on. And you have to like get people to come with you,
Yeah.
that skill translates exactly. Right.
Right.
Whereas with a design, it's the same thing. In many ways, you're almost talking about the same thing half the time, which is like, this is how I think we
Yeah.
should work on this. This is why, like, this is why we're doing this, that kind of thing.
Good. No, that's very interesting. And it kind of leads me on to my next question now. We often talk about the marriage of design, product, and tech, and it differs between companies, and everyone's trying to get it perfect. But now as you're sitting more in product and probably quite close to tech, kind of in hindsight, are there any tips you could give for design leaders to help build those bridges?
Yeah, definitely. I think one opportunity I see for designers, especially, and I don't, and in my career, I haven't seen a lot of designers do this. And I think it's a big opportunity for those who are willing to invest in it a bit, is on the engineering side, is just getting a bit more technical. Like I remember the kind of a thought question running for a long time of like, should designers learn to code? Right. And I would say like, maybe, I don't know, if you're interested, sure, but you should be technical, right? In that, like, you are creating a digital experience. You should understand on some level, like, what it takes to make the thing you're designing, right?
Yeah.
And one, like, being able to do that will make you a better designer, because as you make choices and you make trade-offs in your design, you'll be able to understand, okay, if I take path A, it'll take a developer maybe a sprint to build it. If I take path B, they have to hire a whole new team in order to support this new experience. And so being able to understand those decisions early on will build you a lot of credibility with your engineers. You can say like, hey, I've thought about this. I know we have some components, maybe we can reuse da da da, right? Like, or I know we use Angular and I know that's really strong, has a strong UI library that we can use for this or whatever. Versus like, hey, I think we should build this custom and here's this big elaborate thing. And I haven't thought at all about how hard this is for you. And the engineers are like, oh, this fucking guy,
Yeah.
you know? And
Oh,
so being
so
able to talk to them in their language and in their world and understanding like what you're asking of them.
yeah, and in some of the kind of bigger corporations that we recruit for, they're bringing the creative technologists where they can to help bridge that gap. But that's a luxury that a lot of companies can't have, right?
Right, exactly. And so oftentimes you'll get the designer who, it doesn't have a lot of experience with it, and so they kind of like create this crazy thing and they haven't really thought it through. And I think like similarly, like when you talk about the sort of product and business side, it's kind of the same premise in the sense like learning to speak their language. Like, okay, you're making these choices and these trade-offs. Like, where is the ROI here? Like being able to speak in those terms and understanding like even like those two paths before, like the one easy way to build thing versus this crazy custom way, right? Maybe the custom way is better, but you need to be able to make the case, right? Like, why should we
Yeah.
invest in this? What are we going to get as a result of it? Like, are we going to unlock new opportunities if we do this, right? That kind of thing. Just being able to speak in the languages of the people you're trying to work with and influence and collaborate with is a really powerful skill that more designers should invest time in.
That's great. That's great. And what are your key tips to building a design culture, design ecosystem? And do you think those tips vary in the product world that you're constantly sitting
Yeah,
in?
definitely. I think if you want to build like a culture of design, it has to be something where the entire organization is like sort of bought into that. And that's easy to say, but like, what does that mean in practice? I think one of the challenges is around you work with a group of people, a number of different departments, and they're not designers. Like maybe they haven't spent a lot of time working with designers or even in product or even in software, right? Depending on the kinds of companies that you're working on. Like my company, for example, we make accounting software. So we have a number of accountants on
Right.
ours, right? And so it's like they know what good software is. They have iPhones just like everybody else, but at the same time, they don't know how to give feedback for something like that, right? And I think
Yeah.
part of it is there's like an educational component that comes with it, where you can actually help them understand what does good design is and what it looks like, and most importantly, give them the vocabulary to be able to give that kind of feedback. Like a great place to start is it's the Nielsen Norman, like the 10 heuristics of design, right? And they're really straightforward, right? And like I've actually presented this to our company several times, and it's cool because then you get people who aren't designers basically saying like, hey, like this breaks that heuristic, and like it's really
They
cool to hear.
apply it to other things in their experience, right?
Right, because I think that they can look at designers have this experience all the time where the person they're presenting to doesn't know how to articulate the issue that they're having, right? And so being able to give them the vocabulary to say that is helpful for them and empowers them. They're more likely to give it to you, and then you're also more likely to know what to do with it versus getting that vague feedback when some senior stakeholders like make it pop or all those things that make designers' heads explode, versus they can talk about very specific things like, hey, this error message is unclear, right? Like that's a very specific kind of feedback. These things are not aligned correctly, versus like this looks weird, right? Giving them the vocabulary to be able to do that and encourage them and create space for them to give that feedback. And most importantly, act on that feedback. Because that's one thing to like take the feedback and be like, thank you, and then never do anything about it.
Great. Thank you for that. So final question. Sounds like no regrets then working in the product world as well as the design world.
No, it's been really cool. And if I do, I'll be honest, like there are times when I definitely miss my days in Figma, just like being like purely creative, like those days are largely behind me, which is not, I mean, overall, no regrets, but I do miss it sometimes. It being that like purely creative role is really great. And I really enjoyed being able to do that. And so I think if anyone who's considering that transition, understand that that's like part of the deal. But no, for me, no regrets.
But a new set of challenges, new set of opportunities.
Totally.
And new learning curve as well.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
And great. And thanks for that, Jamie. Really, really great info there, particularly that kind of transition across the product. A final question as I like to finish off with, which is slightly less work and kind of career related. But is there anything you could tell us about yourself that few people know?
Yeah. I think I was thinking about this recently, actually. This is kind of a design callback, but think about we talk about transitioning to careers, I was trying to think about like sort of impacts while designing. And I was thinking about like, what is the most influential, or not influential, but the most impactful thing I ever made, right? In terms of like its reach.
Yeah.
Most design tools nowadays have an interaction where when you leave a comment, right, you like click on the place on the prototype or the thing, or the artifact that you're looking at, and you like, it leaves a little dot and you drop a comment there, and you have this like threaded conversation right on the place where you're looking to give feedback.
Yep.
As far as I know, I created that. Right.
Wow.
I invented that pattern. I did it for InVision years ago when they were just like a side hustle of the agency that I was working at. And as far as I could be wrong, but I still have the original InVision prototype of that commenting system, which they then implemented. So that I think is my most impactful design that I've ever done. I could be wrong. Someone else might have done it, but as far as I know, it was me.
You get the IP for that, and there's a bit of product ownership there as well. I like it from the early days.
It was cool, yeah. And it was, and now everyone, Figma uses, Adobe, everyone uses that same. Yeah. So it's really cool to see that. I mean,
I like that. Well, look, that's a great way to finish. And as always, thanks for your time. Look forward to hosting you on further TDA events and talks in the future.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Chat soon.